I watched my innocent son get sentenced to life in prison by a judge I used to respect. 18 years old, honor student, never in trouble. And still, they dragged him away in cuffs while I sat frozen, knowing the case was built on lies. Witnesses were silenced. Evidence disappeared. The trial was rigged from the start. And the man who smiled as he hammered down that life sentence? Judge Harold Kellerman, a man I'd stood before in court for years. And as my boy looked back at me, terrified, chained, I realized something sickening. They weren't just convicting him. They were sending a message to me. That my place in their system didn't matter. That even a DA's son could be crushed if he was young, black, and inconvenient. But Kellerman forgot one thing. I am the district attorney, and I know exactly where to dig, who to corner, and how to rip a system wide open from the inside. And I will. Because they didn't just frame my son, they declared war on the wrong father. But let's start at the beginning. Before we dive in, let me know where in the world you're listening from today. I always believed in the system. That was my first mistake. For 23 years as district attorney, I'd stood in courtrooms just like this one, confident that justice would prevail. I'd built my career on that belief, my reputation, my whole life. Now I sat frozen in the gallery watching as my son, my boy, stood before Judge Harold Kellerman with his hands cuffed and his future hanging by a thread. The courtroom was packed, every bench filled, reporters lined against the wall, their pens poised like vultures waiting for the kill. The air felt thick, almost unbreathable. "Will the defendant please rise?" the clerk announced. Jamal stood, 18 years old, honor student, basketball captain, college acceptance letters still sitting unopened on his desk at home. My son, my heart. He straightened his shoulders in that ill-fitting suit we'd bought together just 3 days ago. Even now, facing the unthinkable, he carried himself with a dignity that made my chest ache with pride and grief all at once. Judge Kellerman adjusted his reading glasses, taking his time. I'd faced him hundreds of times from the prosecutor's table, but I'd never noticed how his eyes resembled polished glass, reflective, revealing nothing, taking everything in. "Jamal Marcus Wells," Kellerman began, his voice carrying that aristocratic Southern drawl that had intimidated witnesses for decades. "This court has heard the evidence presented against you in the matter of the State versus Wells." My hands gripped the bench until my knuckles went white. Next to me, Jamal's mother, Teresa, clutched my arm so tightly I could feel her fingernails through my jacket. We both knew what was coming. We'd watched the trial unfold like a slow-motion car crash, the planted evidence, the coerced testimonies, the inexplicable rulings that always favored the prosecution. "The jury has found you guilty of murder in the first degree." A small gasp rippled through the courtroom. Not surprise. Everyone knew this verdict was coming, but the collective exhalation of tension finally breaking. "It is therefore the judgment of this court." I leaned forward as if physically closing the distance between myself and my son could somehow change what was about to happen. "That you be sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole." The gavel fell. The sound echoed like a gunshot. Jamal didn't move, didn't flinch. Only the slight rise and fall of his shoulders told me he was still breathing. "Your Honor," his defense attorney started, rising to his feet. "The court has ruled, Counselor." Kellerman cut him off, that icy smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Perhaps if the defendant had shown remorse for his actions." "He can't show remorse for something he didn't do," I said, the words escaping before I could stop them. The courtroom went silent. Every head turned toward me. I was on my feet, though I didn't remember standing. Kellerman's gaze shifted to me, and for a brief moment something flickered behind those glass eyes. Satisfaction, almost pleasure. "Mr. Wells," he said, "I understand this is difficult for you as a father, but I would remind you that in this courtroom, you are not the district attorney. You would do well to remember your place." My place. As if my place as a father could be separated from who I was. As if I could compartmentalize away the horror of watching my son being sacrificed to a system I had served faithfully for decades. "This court is adjourned," Kellerman announced, rising from the bench with that same smug half-smile. The bailiffs moved toward Jamal. One of them, Officer Reynolds, who had come to our family barbecues, who had watched Jamal grow up, couldn't meet my eyes as he took my son by the arm. "Dad," Jamal called, looking back over his shoulder. His voice cracked, the first sign that his composure was slipping. "Dad, don't let them—" "I'll fix this," I promised, pushing forward against the crowd now standing between us. "Jamal, I'll fix this." But the doors were already closing behind him. My son, being led away in chains for a crime manufactured to destroy him, to destroy us both. Teresa collapsed against me, her sobs shaking us both. Around us, the courtroom emptied. My colleagues, people I'd worked with for years, hurried past with averted eyes. No one stopped. No one spoke. It was as if we'd become untouchable in the span of a gavel stroke. I helped Teresa to her feet, supporting her weight as we stumbled into the hallway. The reporters descended immediately, microphones thrust into our faces, questions overlapping into a deafening cacophony. "District Attorney Wells, how does it feel to be on the other side of a conviction? Will you be resigning your position after this? Do you believe your son received special treatment because of your position?" The flash of cameras captured my breakdown in high definition. Tomorrow my face would be splashed across every newspaper in the state. The mighty DA, brought to his knees. Through the sea of reporters, I caught sight of my assistant DA, Philip, huddled with the prosecution team. They were smiling, congratulating each other on their victory. Philip saw me watching and quickly looked away, ushering the others toward the elevator. These were my people, my team, now celebrating my son's destruction. "Marcus," Teresa whispered, her voice hollow. "How did this happen? All the evidence, the witnesses, none of it made sense." It didn't make sense because it wasn't meant to. The realization crystallized in my mind with terrible clarity. This wasn't justice gone wrong. This was justice perverted deliberately, systematically, with surgical precision. I looked back toward the courtroom where Judge Kellerman was gathering his papers. He glanced up, caught my eye through the doorway, and had the audacity to nod slightly, a gesture of finality, of triumph. In that moment, I understood. My son's case hadn't been a trial. It had been an execution, carried out with gavels instead of guns, with false testimony instead of bullets. And I, with all my power as district attorney, had been utterly powerless to stop it. The system I had defended my entire career had turned on my family with cold, calculated efficiency. And Judge Harold Kellerman, with his silver hair and glass eyes, had orchestrated every moment of it. As security finally cleared a path for us through the reporters, I felt something inside me shift, something fundamental breaking apart and reforming into something harder, colder, more resolute. The system had failed my son, and I would not fail him too. I found Sean in the courthouse parking garage, leaning against his sleek black Audi. I'd called in every favor I had to track him down after he'd slipped out of the courtroom through the judge's chambers. My old friend who'd promised to defend my son with everything he had. "Sean," I called out, my voice echoing between concrete pillars. He turned and I saw his face change, from surprise to something harder. He straightened his tie, an expensive silk number that probably cost more than what most of our clients made in a week. "Marcus." He nodded as if we were colleagues passing in a hallway, not two men standing in the aftermath of my son's life being destroyed. I was just heading out. "You're not going anywhere until you tell me what happened in there." I moved closer, blocking his path to the driver's door. "That wasn't a defense, Sean. That was a surrender." He sighed, checking his watch. "Look, I did everything I could. The evidence was overwhelming." "The evidence was garbage," my voice shook. "The witness statements contradicted each other. The timeline made no sense. And the DNA report was conclusive," Sean interrupted. "It was incomplete," I shot back. "And you know it. You didn't even challenge it. You didn't call our expert witnesses. You didn't cross-examine half the prosecution's witnesses. It's like you weren't even trying." Sean's eyes hardened. "Not every case is winnable, Marcus. Even you know that." "This isn't just a case. This is my son." I slammed my palm against his car, the sound cracking through the garage like a gunshot. Jamal had an alibi. 3 people confirmed he was at the library when that girl was killed. Where was that in your defense? Sean looked around, then lowered his voice. Their statements weren't credible. According to who? Kellerman? I moved in closer. What did he have on you, Sean? What made you throw my son to the wolves? A flicker of something, fear maybe, crossed Sean's face before he masked it. You're upset. I understand. But this conspiracy theory isn't helping Jamal. Then help me understand. The evidence was suppressed, witnesses were intimidated, and you barely showed up. Why? Sean's shoulders slumped slightly. For a moment, I thought I'd broken through. Then he straightened, his expression going flat and professional. You don't want to pull that thread, Marcus, he said quietly. What thread? What are you talking about? He opened his car door, creating a barrier between us. Some cases are bigger than one person, even bigger than one family. He slid into the driver's seat. I'm sorry about Jamal. I truly am. But my advice? Accept the verdict and move on. There's nothing to be gained by digging. Sean, but he'd already closed the door. The engine purred to life and he backed out, leaving me standing alone in the dim garage, his cryptic warning echoing in my head. You don't want to pull that thread. My office felt foreign when I returned. The same space I'd commanded for years now seemed to be watching me, judging me. My assistant, Lynette, had left a stack of messages on my desk. The governor, the mayor, the police commissioner, all expressing concern about my personal situation. Personal situation, as if my son's life being stolen was a minor inconvenience. I closed the door, locking it behind me. Sean's warning kept repeating in my mind. What thread? What was he afraid of? I sat at my desk staring at the wall of case files that lined my office. 15 years as DA, thousands of cases. I'd built my career on being tough but fair. I'd believed in the system. Now the system had swallowed my son. Something Sean had said nagged at me. Some cases are bigger than one person. It wasn't just about Jamal. This was something larger. I moved to the file cabinets, pulling open drawers, scanning labels. My hands were shaking as I pulled out box after box of old cases. Cases Kellerman had presided over. Cases where I'd stood before him, confident in the righteousness of my prosecutions. How many had he manipulated? How many lives had he twisted to serve whatever corrupt agenda was at work here? 3 hours later, surrounded by open files and scattered papers, I found it. A decade-old murder case. James Washington, a community activist from the same neighborhood as Jamal. He'd been convicted of killing a police officer during a protest that turned violent. I remembered the case. It had been contentious, racially charged. Washington had maintained his innocence until the end. Judge Kellerman had presided. And the evidence, as I reviewed it now with fresh eyes, I saw the holes, the inconsistencies, the convenient witness who'd appeared at the last minute, the mishandled ballistics report. It was the same pattern, the same playbook they'd used against Jamal. I dug deeper, finding notes I'd made during the trial, questions I'd had but never pursued. A photo fell from the file, Washington at a community meeting weeks before his arrest, and there in the background, watching from the doorway, Harold Kellerman. Not in his judicial robes, but in plain clothes, observing, selecting his target. My stomach turned to ice. This wasn't random. This was systematic. Kellerman had been using the bench to silence black voices for years, and I had been his unwitting instrument, bringing him the cases he could weaponize. I'd helped him destroy lives, including now my own son's. I gathered the Washington file and several others that showed similar patterns. The clock on my wall read 2:17 a.m. when I finally drove home. The house was dark, except for the kitchen light. Teresa had left a note saying she'd gone to her sister's. She couldn't bear to be in our house with all of Jamal's things. I understood. I could barely stand it myself. I spread the files across our dining room table, the evidence of my complicity in a corrupt system. For hours, I stared at them, connecting dots, seeing the pattern of destruction Kellerman had orchestrated over decades. By dawn, I knew there was only one path forward. The system wouldn't police itself. The judges, the lawyers, the police. They were all connected, all protecting each other. To save my son, I would have to burn it all down, including my own career, including the cases I'd won that now seemed suspect. I would have to burn my own house down to cleanse it. As the first light of morning crept through the windows, I made my decision. For Jamal, for James Washington, for everyone who'd been sacrificed on the altar of Kellerman's twisted version of justice. The system had failed them. I would not. I was halfway through my second cup of coffee when the courier arrived. The envelope bore the official seal of the Department of Corrections, a sight that now made my stomach clench. I signed for it with a hand that didn't feel like my own. Inside was a single sheet of paper, a custody transfer notice. Inmate Wells Jamal A. will be transferred to Ravenwood Correctional Facility on June 17th. 6 weeks. They were giving me 6 weeks before they buried my son alive. I knew Ravenwood. Every prosecutor in the state did. It wasn't just maximum security. It was where they sent the ones they wanted to break. Ravenwood had the highest inmate death rate in the state. Guards who'd been investigated multiple times for excessive force. Gang violence that administration turned a blind eye to. The coffee mug slipped from my hand, shattering against the kitchen floor. I didn't move to clean it up. My mind was racing through possibilities, each one darker than the last. Once Jamal went into Ravenwood, the chances of getting him out, even if I found evidence to overturn his conviction, dropped dramatically. I had 6 weeks to save my son's life. I grabbed my car keys and the files I'd collected overnight. There was only one person I could think of who might help me navigate this mess. Someone who knew the system's dark corners better than I did. Gloria Saunders lived in a modest brick house on the east side of town. Her front yard was immaculate, roses blooming in careful rows, not a weed in sight. It was 7:30 in the morning when I knocked on her door. "Marcus Wells," she said when she opened it, no surprise in her voice despite the early hour. "I wondered when you'd show up." Gloria hadn't changed much in the decade since she'd retired from the Civil Rights Commission. Her silver-streaked braids were pulled back in a neat bun, and her eyes were just as sharp as they'd been when she'd grilled me during joint investigations years ago. "You've heard about Jamal," I said. It wasn't a question. "Come in before the neighbors start talking." She held the door open. "Though I imagine your reputation's already in tatters." Her living room was like her, organized no nonsense with bookshelves lining every wall. Law books, history books, files that I suspected weren't supposed to have left government offices. "They're sending him to Ravenwood," I said, handing her the transfer notice. 6 weeks. Gloria studied the paper, her mouth tightening. "Kellerman's making sure your boy disappears for good." "You know about Kellerman?" She gave me a look that made me feel like a first-year law student again. "I've been tracking Harold Kellerman for 30 years, Marcus. That man has been systematically removing young black voices from this community since he was an ADA. I just could never prove it." My heart pounded. "I think I might have something." I spread the files across her coffee table. The Washington case, 3 others I'd found with similar patterns. Gloria sat beside me, paging through them with practiced efficiency. "James Washington," she murmured. "I remember this case. He was organizing voter registration drives in neighborhoods the power structure didn't want voting." "And Kellerman sent him away for life," I said. "Just like Jamal." Gloria's eyes met mine. "What are you proposing, Marcus?" "You're still the DA. If you're looking to bend rules, you've come to the wrong place. I spent my career fighting corruption, not adding to it." "I'm not looking to break the law," I said, though even I could hear the uncertainty in my voice. "I'm looking for justice, for Jamal, for Washington, for anyone Kellerman has destroyed." She studied me for a long moment. "And if getting justice means sacrificing your career, your reputation, everything you've built? None of it matters if I can't save my son." Gloria nodded slowly. "Then we need to start pulling threads. But I need to know you're prepared for what we might find. This goes beyond Kellerman. A judge doesn't operate in isolation. There will be others involved, police, prosecutors, maybe even people in your office." The thought made me sick, but I nodded. "I'm ready." "No, you're not," she said bluntly. "But you will be." She stood up, moving to one of her bookshelves. "I've been collecting information for years. Patterns of cases, connections between Kellerman and certain officers, businesses that benefited from his rulings." She pulled down a thick binder and handed it to me. Inside were newspaper clippings, court transcripts, and handwritten notes spanning decades. "This is your education, Marcus. Start reading. I'll make some calls." For the next 3 hours, I immersed myself in Gloria's research while she worked the phone in her kitchen. The picture that emerged was more horrifying than I'd imagined. Kellerman wasn't just racist, he was strategic. He targeted young men and women who showed leadership potential in the Black community. Activists, student leaders, community organizers, people like James Washington, people like my son who'd been organizing campus protests against police brutality before his arrest. "Marcus," Gloria called from the kitchen, "come here." She had a legal pad covered in names and arrows. "I've got a contact at the corrections department. Jamal's transfer to Ravenwood isn't standard procedure. Someone pushed it through, specifically requested it." "Kellerman? Likely, but he'd need help on the inside. Someone at DOC with authority." She tapped her pen against a name she'd circled. "Raymond Voss, Deputy Director of Inmate Placement. He and Kellerman go way back, law school together, same fraternity. Voss signs off on all special transfer requests." Another thread to pull, another connection in the web that had ensnared my son. "Have you told Jamal about the transfer?" Gloria asked. I looked away. "Not yet." "Why not?" "Because I don't want him to lose hope," I admitted. "If he knows he's going to Ravenwood." Gloria's expression softened slightly, the first crack in her formidable exterior. "You need to tell him, Marcus. He deserves to know what's coming, and he might have information that could help us." She was right, of course, but the thought of sitting across from my son, telling him he was being sent to a place where he might not survive, I couldn't bear it. "We have 6 weeks," Gloria said, her voice firm but not unkind. "That's not much time to unravel decades of corruption. We need to move fast, and we need to be smart. These people won't hesitate to destroy you if they realize what you're doing." I nodded, feeling the weight of the task ahead. "Where do we start?" "With the evidence in Jamal's case. I want to see everything. Police reports, witness statements, forensics. Then we compare it to these other cases. Look for patterns, procedural irregularities, anything that connects them. And then," Gloria's eyes were steel, "then we find the weak link in Kellerman's chain and we break it wide open." The dining room in Gloria's house had transformed into our war room. Files covered every inch of the table, spilled onto the floor, and plastered the walls. We'd been at it for 2 weeks straight, and what we'd uncovered made me physically ill. "Look at this pattern," Gloria said, tapping a legal pad where she'd created a timeline. "In the last 15 years, Kellerman has sentenced over 200 young Black men between the ages of 18 and 25 to maximum sentences. 200. I leaned over her shoulder, my stomach churning. "And how many of those cases involved the same officers?" 70% involved either Detective Reeves or Detective Morrison, sometimes both. She shuffled through another stack of papers, and in 65% of those cases, key evidence was either lost or never processed. "Just like Jamal's case," I muttered. The security footage from the convenience store across from the murder scene had mysteriously disappeared before trial. Footage that would have shown Jamal was nowhere near the crime when it happened. "Exactly like Jamal's case," Gloria confirmed. "And look at this." She handed me a stack of affidavits we'd managed to collect from former defendants. "The pattern is almost identical. Young Black man, first-time offender, politically active, arrested by Reeves or Morrison, interrogated without counsel present, confession obtained after hours of questioning, confessions that later defendants claim were coerced." I flipped through the statements, my hands shaking with rage. One after another described the same tactics: sleep deprivation, threats against family members, promises of leniency that never materialized. "They're targeting community leaders," I said, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. People who might make a difference. People like Jamal. Gloria nodded grimly. "It's a pipeline. And Kellerman is the gatekeeper, making sure these cases never get a fair hearing. I sank into a chair, overwhelmed by the scale of what we were uncovering. How did I not see this? I've been in that courthouse for 15 years. Because you weren't looking, Gloria said, not unkindly. None of us want to believe the system we're part of is fundamentally broken. The next morning, I went to the county jail to visit Jamal. 3 weeks had passed since his sentencing, and I still hadn't told him about the transfer to Ravenwood. Each time I visited, I convinced myself I'd tell him, and each time the words stuck in my throat. The visitation room was cold and sterile. Jamal looked thinner than the week before, the orange jumpsuit hanging loose on his frame. Dark circles shadowed his eyes. "How are you holding up?" I asked, hating the inadequacy of the question. He shrugged. "Same as yesterday, same as tomorrow." "Jamal, I started, then stopped, the words failing me again. "You don't have to pretend," he said quietly. "I know where they're sending me. One of the guards made sure to tell me." My heart sank. I was going to tell you. I just wanted to protect me. His laugh was hollow. "Little late for that, Dad." The accusation stung, but I couldn't deny the truth in it. I'd failed to protect him when it mattered most. "I'm working on getting you out," I said, leaning forward. "Gloria Saunders and we're building a case. We've found patterns, evidence of misconduct. Kellerman isn't just corrupt. He's been systematically targeting young men like you for years." For the first time, a flicker of interest crossed Jamal's face. "Ms. Saunders? The civil rights lawyer?" I nodded. "She's been tracking Kellerman for decades. We're going to expose him, Jamal. We're going to get you out." He studied me for a long moment. "What about your job, your career?" "None of that matters, not anymore." Something shifted in his expression. Not quite hope, but perhaps the ghost of it. "Be careful, Dad. These people, they won't just roll over." He was right. The resistance had already begun. That morning, I'd found my office door unlocked, though I distinctly remembered securing it. Files were slightly out of place. My computer had been accessed. In court, judges who'd once greeted me warmly now barely acknowledged my presence. Prosecutors who'd been friends for years suddenly had no time to talk. In the corridors, conversations stopped when I approached. After leaving Jamal, I headed to the courthouse to file some routine motions. As I passed the district attorney's office, my secretary, Diane, pulled me aside. "People are talking," she whispered, glancing nervously around. "About you and Gloria Saunders, about the cases you're looking into." "Let them talk," I said, though my heart raced. "It's not just talk, Marcus. The chief of police called the DA's office yesterday, and this morning, Judge Kellerman was in a closed-door meeting with the Attorney General. The walls were closing in. They knew what we were doing, and they were mobilizing to stop us. That night, Gloria and I spread our evidence across her dining room table again. Affidavits, case files, statistical analyses showing the disparity in Kellerman's sentencing practices." "It's not enough," Gloria said, frustration evident in her voice. "We need something concrete, something that directly ties Kellerman to misconduct." "What about the security footage from Jamal's case?" I suggested. "If we could prove it was deliberately suppressed." Gloria nodded slowly. "That could work, but who had access to it? Who could have made it disappear?" I thought back to what Sean had said that day in the courthouse hallway. You don't want to pull that thread. What did he know? And more importantly, who else was involved? The corruption wasn't just Kellerman. It was a system, a well-oiled machine that processed young black men into prisoners with ruthless efficiency. Detectives who fabricated evidence, prosecutors who looked the other way, defense attorneys who rolled over, and at the helm, a judge whose racism was matched only by his cunning. 3 weeks left until Jamal's transfer. The clock was ticking, and the silence from my son was deafening. I drove back from the county clerk's office with a knot in my stomach. Another dead end. Melanie Pearson, the witness who'd allegedly seen Jamal at the scene of the murder, had suddenly moved to Arizona. No forwarding address, no phone number, just gone. She was the third witness to vanish in 2 weeks. First, Derek Wilson, the store clerk who'd been pressured into identifying Jamal in a lineup. Then Officer Ramirez, who'd expressed doubts about the case privately but testified against Jamal anyway. Now Melanie. It wasn't coincidence, someone was cleaning house. I pulled into Gloria's driveway, expecting to find her surrounded by papers as usual. Instead, she was sitting on her porch steps, hands trembling around a mug of tea that had long gone cold. "Gloria?" I hurried to her side. "What happened?" Her eyes were distant, unfocused. Black sedan, tinted windows, followed me from the courthouse all the way to the grocery store, parked across the street while I shopped, then tailed me home. I sat beside her, scanning the quiet suburban street. "Did you get a plate number?" Covered in mud, she took a shaky sip of tea. "Convenient, right?" "Did you call the police?" Gloria gave me a look that made me feel foolish for even suggesting it. "And tell them what? That the people they work for are intimidating me? Please." She was right. We couldn't trust the police, not when we were investigating their own. "We need to be more careful," I said. "Maybe we should move our research somewhere else." Gloria shook her head. "My house has the best security system money can buy. We keep working here." I didn't argue. Gloria had been fighting these battles longer than I had. If she thought her home was safe, I had to trust her judgment. 3 days later, I learned how wrong we both were. The call came at 2:17 a.m. I fumbled for my phone, still half asleep. "Marcus." Gloria's voice was barely recognizable. "It's gone. Everything's gone." I sat bolt upright. "What's gone?" "Gloria, what happened?" "My house." Her voice broke. "They burned it down." I drove through the night with my heart in my throat. 2 blocks from Gloria's street, I could already see the glow against the sky. Fire trucks lined the road, their lights painting everything in surreal flashes of red. Gloria stood on the sidewalk across from what remained of her home. The elegant 2-story Victorian was now a charred skeleton, still smoldering in places. Firefighters moved through the ruins, their faces grim. She didn't acknowledge me when I approached, just kept staring at the destruction. "Was anyone hurt?" I asked. "No." Her voice was flat. "I was working late in my study, smelled smoke. Got out the back door before the stairs collapsed." A fire captain approached us, helmet under his arm. "Ms. Saunders, we've done a preliminary assessment." Gloria turned to him, her face hardening. "And definitely arson, accelerant used at multiple points of origin, professional job." I put my hand on Gloria's shoulder. "We'll find temporary housing, get you set up somewhere safe." "That's not what matters," she cut me off. "My files, Marcus. 30 years of work. Evidence against Kellerman, against the whole system. Notes from cases going back decades." Her voice finally broke. All gone. The realization hit me like a physical blow. We'd kept digital backups of some things, but Gloria was old school. Her most valuable research, handwritten notes, original documents, connections she'd mapped out on paper, was irreplaceable. "They know we're close," she said, her eyes reflecting the dying embers of her home. "They wouldn't have done this if we weren't a threat." But I could feel it slipping away. Without Gloria's archives, without witnesses willing to come forward, what did we have? Statistical patterns? Circumstantial evidence? Nothing that would stand up in court. And Jamal's transfer was just 2 weeks away. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with a legal pad and pen. "Dear Jamal," I wrote, then stopped. What could I possibly say? The truth would crush him, that we were being systematically blocked at every turn, that our key witnesses were disappearing, that our evidence had literally gone up in flames. So I lied. "We're making real progress. Gloria and I have uncovered a pattern of misconduct by Judge Kellerman that we believe will be grounds for a new trial. We've identified witnesses willing to testify about improprieties in your case. Stay strong, I'm going to get you out of there." I read it back and something broke inside me. The words blurred as tears filled my eyes. I was lying to my own son, giving him false hope when I had none myself. The paper crumpled in my fist as sobs racked my body. I hadn't cried like this since Jamal's mother died. Deep, guttural cries that left me gasping for air. When I finally quieted, the silence of the house pressed in around me. The home where I'd raised Jamal, taught him to ride a bike, helped him with homework, prepared him for a world I thought I understood, a world I thought I could protect him from. I smoothed out the letter, staring at my handwriting. The lie stared back at me, mocking my powerlessness. I had no idea how to save my son. The next morning, I dragged myself into the office before dawn. My eyes were swollen from crying and my head pounded with each heartbeat. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead like angry wasps as I unlocked my door. I'd come in early to avoid the pitying glances from colleagues who once respected me. I flipped on the light and froze. Something was off. My inbox tray, which I'd emptied yesterday, now held a single padded envelope. No postmark, no return address. Just my name scrawled across the front in block letters. The hair on the back of my neck stood up. Someone had been in my office. I approached cautiously, examining the envelope from all angles before picking it up. It was lightweight, with something small and solid inside. I grabbed a letter opener and carefully slit the top. A black flash drive tumbled onto my desk. For a long moment, I just stared at it. In our digital age, anonymous flash drives were the modern equivalent of masked informants in parking garages. They meant danger, and possibly salvation. I locked my office door and booted up my computer, heart hammering against my ribs. My fingers trembled as I plugged in the drive. A single video file appeared on the screen. WatchNow.mp4. I hesitated, cursor hovering over the file. This could be anything, a trap, a virus, or worse. But what choice did I have? I double-clicked. The video began playing. Grainy black and white surveillance footage filled my screen. The timestamp in the corner read 11:42 p.m., September 17th, the night of the murder Jamal was convicted of. My breath caught. This was from the corner store's security camera, footage that Detective Marlowe had testified malfunctioned that night. The camera angle showed the sidewalk and part of the street. For several seconds, nothing happened. Then a figure in a hoodie walked into frame, pacing nervously. I leaned closer, squinting at the pixelated image. Not Jamal. The build was wrong, shorter, stockier. Another man appeared, gesturing angrily. The argument escalated. The hooded figure backed up, then suddenly reached into his waistband. A muzzle flash lit up the screen. The victim crumpled to the ground. The shooter turned to flee, and for just a moment, his face caught the streetlight. "Oh my God," I whispered. I knew that face. Devin Marlowe. Detective Marlowe's nephew. I rewound the video, played it again. There was no mistake. Devin Marlowe had pulled the trigger, not my son. As the shooter fled, another figure stepped into frame from across the street. A man in a jacket approached the body, checked for a pulse, then looked directly at the camera. Detective Carson, Marlowe's partner. I checked the timestamp again, 11:45 p.m. According to court records, both Marlowe and Carson claimed they didn't arrive at the scene until 12:10 a.m. after an anonymous 911 call. They'd testified under oath that they found Jamal standing over the body. But this footage showed Carson at the scene immediately after the shooting, with Devin nowhere to be seen. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely operate the mouse. I played the video a third time, a fourth, memorizing every detail, every pixel. This wasn't just evidence of Jamal's innocence. This was proof of a conspiracy, a detective covering up his nephew's crime by framing my son. I sat back in my chair, stunned. For weeks, Gloria and I had been digging through old cases, looking for patterns of corruption. We'd been thinking too small. This wasn't just about Judge Kellerman or coerced confessions. This was a direct line from Detective Marlowe to his nephew Devin, with my son as the sacrificial lamb. Everything changed in that moment. The helplessness that had crushed me last night transformed into something else, something with teeth. I copied the video file to my personal drive, then to the cloud, then to a second flash drive I kept on my keychain. I couldn't risk losing this evidence like we'd lost Gloria's files. My phone rang, startling me so badly I nearly fell out of my chair. "Marcus." Gloria's voice sounded stronger than it had last night. "I've been thinking. We need to—" "Come to my office," I cut her off. "Now, don't talk to anyone. Don't stop anywhere." "What's happened?" I looked at the frozen image on my screen. Devin Marlowe's face illuminated by the flash of his own gun. "Everything," I said. "Everything's happened." I hung up and stared at the video again. The real killer, caught in the act. The corrupt cop at the scene. The timestamp that proved their testimony was perjury. For the first time since Jamal was sentenced, I felt something dangerous stir in my chest. Hope. But with it came rage. Cold, precise rage. They had taken my son's freedom. They had nearly broken me. And for what? To protect a murderer because he happened to be family? I would burn their whole system to the ground. I needed to verify this footage was legitimate before making my next move. A video from an anonymous source wouldn't stand up in court without authentication. My hands trembled as I pulled up the original case files on my computer. First, I needed to confirm the location. I studied the storefront visible in the corner of the frame, Javier's Liquor on 34th and Maple. The angle matched what would be captured by their exterior security camera. In the trial transcripts, Detective Marlowe had testified under oath that this camera malfunctioned that night, convenient timing that now looked deliberate. Next, I cross-referenced the timestamp. The murder occurred at 11:42 p.m. according to the coroner's report. The video showed the shooting at exactly that time. I pulled up the police dispatch logs. Marlowe and his partner, Officer Riggs, had officially reported arriving on scene at 12:10 a.m., nearly 30 minutes after the shooting. Yet there was Riggs, clear as day, checking the victim's pulse at 11:45 p.m. "Son of a bitch," I whispered. I dug deeper. During trial, Officer Riggs had taken the stand and delivered damning testimony against my son. Under oath, he'd stated, "When we arrived at 12:10, we found the defendant standing over the victim. The murder weapon was recovered 10 feet away in the alley." I replayed the video again. There was Riggs at 11:45 p.m., 25 minutes before he claimed to arrive. There was no sign of Jamal anywhere in the footage. And the shooter? Devin Marlowe, Detective Marlowe's nephew, who conveniently was never mentioned in any report. The door to my office opened and Gloria slipped in, locking it behind her. "What's so urgent?" she asked, then noticed my expression. "Marcus, what is it?" Without a word, I turned my monitor toward her and played the video. Her eyes widened as she watched, hand covering her mouth. "Is that Detective Marlowe's nephew?" I confirmed. "And Officer Riggs at the scene immediately after the shooting, not at 12:10 like he testified." Gloria sank into the chair across from me. "This changes everything. It proves Jamal is innocent, it proves police corruption, it proves perjury." My voice grew stronger with each statement. "But there's a problem." "How did you get this?" "Anonymous delivery, no return address, no note, nothing." Gloria's expression darkened. "Inadmissible." "Completely." I ran my hands over my face. "If I submit this as evidence in an appeal, the first question will be how I obtained it. I can't prove chain of custody. I can't authenticate it without revealing the source, which I don't even know." "And if you did know?" Gloria asked. "Whoever sent this committed a crime. They stole evidence, concealed it during an active investigation. If they're inside the department, they'd face charges. So legally my hands are tied." I stood up and paced the length of my office. "I'm the district attorney. I can't knowingly use tainted evidence even to free my own son." The irony was crushing. I finally had proof of Jamal's innocence and I couldn't use it, not through official channels. "There's another way," Gloria said quietly. I stopped pacing. "Leak it." She nodded. "Anonymous drop to every news outlet in the city. Let public pressure force an investigation. If I'm connected to the leak, I lose my job, maybe face disbarment. If you're not connected, Jamal stays in prison while a killer walks free." The weight of the decision pressed down on me. My career versus my son's freedom. No contest, really. But there was another concern. If I leak this without proper authentication, Kellerman could declare it inadmissible in any appeal. He could claim it's doctored footage. I slumped back into my chair. We need to verify this independently, find corroborating evidence. The timestamp, Gloria said suddenly. Cell tower records. I looked up. What? Officer Riggs's phone. If he was at the scene at 11:45, his cell phone would ping the nearest tower. Same for Marlowe and his nephew. Cell records require a warrant, which you, as district attorney, could request as part of an internal investigation. Gloria leaned forward. You don't have to mention the video. Just say you're reviewing all evidence in the case before Jamal's transfer. She was right. I could request the records without revealing I had the video. If the cell data matched the timestamp on the footage, we'd have independent verification. And once we have that, I asked, then we decide whether to go legal or leak it. Gloria's eyes hardened. But either way, we'll have proof that Officer Riggs committed perjury. He swore under oath he wasn't there until 12:10. This video shows him at the scene at 11:45. That's a felony. I nodded slowly, the pieces falling into place. I'll request the records today. We'll need to move fast. Jamal's transfer to Ravenwood is in less than 4 weeks. The smoking gun was in my hands, but I couldn't fire it, not yet. I had to build an airtight case, one that even Kellerman couldn't dismiss. The timestamp on that video was the key. It didn't just prove my son's innocence, it exposed the entire conspiracy. Officer Riggs had lied under oath. Detective Marlowe had covered for his nephew. And somewhere in this corrupt system, someone with a conscience had slipped me the truth. I just had to figure out how to use it without destroying my ability to help Jamal. I knew exactly which journalist to call. Elaine Carter had been covering the courthouse for 15 years, sharp, ethical, and most importantly, someone who'd seen Kellerman's pattern of behavior firsthand. I need to meet today off the record, I told her when she answered. Marcus? What's going? Not over the phone, the coffee shop on Willow Street, 1 hour. I arrived early, choosing a corner booth where I could see the door. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. The cell records had come through yesterday, confirming everything the video showed. Officer Riggs' phone had pinged the tower 2 blocks from the murder scene at 11:47 p.m., exactly when the video showed him arriving with Devin Marlowe. Elaine slid into the booth across from me, her expression grave. You look terrible. I haven't slept in days. I glanced around before sliding a manila envelope across the table. This doesn't come from me. You never saw me today. She didn't touch the envelope. What am I looking at? Evidence that Judge Kellerman and the police department railroaded my son. Surveillance footage showing the real killer, Detective Marlowe's nephew. Cell tower records proving Officer Riggs lied under oath about his whereabouts. And 3 affidavits from witnesses who were pressured to change their testimony. Elaine's eyes widened. Marcus, if you're giving me stolen evidence, I'm not giving you anything, I said carefully. I'm having coffee. Someone left that envelope on this table. That's all you know. She stared at me for a long moment, then slowly took the envelope. If this checks out, it's explosive. It checks out. My voice cracked. My son is innocent, Elaine. They're sending him to Ravenwood in 3 weeks. He won't survive there. You know what this means for you if they trace this back? I don't care anymore. The words came out with a certainty that surprised even me. They took my son. What else can they take? Elaine nodded slowly. I'll need 24 hours to authenticate everything. Then we go live. Not just your paper, every outlet, social media, all at once. A coordinated drop. She tucked the envelope into her bag. They'll know it was you, Marcus. Let them prove it. I walked out of that coffee shop feeling lighter than I had in months. The die was cast. There was no going back. Exactly 26 hours later, my phone exploded with notifications. I turned on the TV to see my son's face on the screen, side by side with grainy footage of Devin Marlowe firing a gun. Breaking news tonight, the anchor announced. Explosive evidence suggests the son of District Attorney Marcus Wells may have been wrongfully convicted in last year's high-profile murder case. The headline crawled across the bottom of the screen. DA's son wrongly convicted? Video shows different shooter. I watched, transfixed, as Elaine appeared on screen, methodically laying out the evidence. The surveillance footage, the cell records contradicting sworn testimony, the affidavits from witnesses who'd been pressured to change their stories. Sources close to the investigation suggest this evidence was deliberately suppressed during trial, she said. Judge Harold Kellerman, who presided over the case, has declined to comment. My phone rang. The district attorney's office. Wells, I answered, trying to keep my voice steady. My office now. My boss's voice was ice cold. When I arrived, the reception area was packed with reporters. They swarmed me as I walked in. Did you leak the evidence, Mr. Wells? Do you believe Judge Kellerman suppressed evidence? Will you be filing for your son's immediate release? I pushed past them without comment, my heart hammering in my chest. Inside the DA's office, Chief District Attorney Morrison was waiting with 2 members of the Ethics Committee. Sit down, Marcus. I remained standing. Sir. Did you leak evidence in your son's case to the media? I have no comment on the source of that evidence. Morrison's face flushed red. This office cannot function if its own DA is undermining the judicial process. You're suspended, effective immediately. Badge and gun on my desk. I'd known this was coming, but the reality still hit like a physical blow. I unclipped my badge and placed it on the desk, followed by my service weapon. The evidence speaks for itself, I said quietly. My son is innocent. Officer Riggs committed perjury. Detective Marlowe covered up his nephew's crime, and Judge Kellerman made sure the jury never saw the truth. That will be for an independent investigation to determine, Morrison replied. But it won't be your investigation. Security will escort you out. I walked out of that office, my office for 12 years, with my head high. The reporters followed me to the elevator, shouting questions. For the first time, I stopped and turned to face them. My son, Jamal Wells, was wrongfully convicted of a murder he did not commit. The evidence released today proves his innocence beyond any doubt. I call on the Attorney General to immediately review this case and all others handled by Judge Kellerman. That's all I have to say at this time. The cameras flashed as I stepped into the elevator. When the doors closed, I finally let out the breath I'd been holding. My career was over, my reputation possibly in tatters. But for the first time since Jamal's conviction, I felt something I'd almost forgotten. Hope. The tide was turning, the truth was out. And not even Kellerman could stop what was coming now. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. The Starlight Diner. 1 hour. After the media explosion, I'd been staying at a motel on the edge of town. I changed my shirt, grabbed my car keys, and headed out. The diner was nearly empty when I arrived. Just a couple of truckers at the counter and an elderly woman nursing a cup of coffee in the corner booth. Then I saw her. Gloria Saunders sat in the back booth, a newspaper spread out in front of her. Silver-streaked braids pulled back tight. She didn't look up when I approached, just tapped a finger on the headline. Judge under fire, Kellerman faces investigation. Took you long enough, she said, finally meeting my eyes. I slid into the booth across from her. Where have you been? After the fire, I thought. That I'd tuck tail and run? Her eyes flashed. Please. I've been gathering evidence, staying with my sister in Baltimore. Couldn't risk them knowing I was still in the game. The waitress brought over a coffee without me asking. Gloria waited until she walked away before sliding a manila folder across the table. 3 more cases, same pattern. Kellerman and Marlowe working together to railroad young black men. Rigged lineups, coerced confessions, suppressed evidence. She tapped the folder. One of these boys died in prison. Suicide, they said. My stomach twisted. Gloria, I'm sorry about your house. Houses can be rebuilt. She leaned forward. But we've got 6 days until Jamal gets transferred to Ravenwood. We need to move now. The appeal could take months. Not anymore. A smile ghosted across her face. Your little media circus worked. The appeals court has agreed to an emergency hearing. Day after tomorrow. My heart nearly stopped. That fast? Public pressure is a beautiful thing. And I've been working my contacts. Judge Watkins will hear the case. She's got no love for Kellerman. Gloria pulled out another folder. We need to subpoena Officer Riggs, get him on the stand with that video ready to play. He'll deny it, say the footage is doctored. That's why I had the video authenticated by 2 independent forensic experts. She slid over their reports. And we've got the tower pings placing his phone at the scene. For the next 3 hours, we built our strategy. I'd prepare the video presentation myself, no chance for tampering. Gloria would handle the witness prep for our 2 recanting witnesses. We needed to be airtight. What about Kellerman? I asked. Let him hang himself, Gloria said. Once Riggs cracks, the dominoes will fall. It was nearly midnight when we finished. Gloria checked her watch and gathered her papers. I'm at the Baymont Inn, room 212. Be there at 7 tomorrow morning. We've got 1 shot at this. I nodded, exhaustion and hope battling in my chest. Gloria, thank you for not giving up. She paused, her eyes softening slightly. That boy of yours deserves justice, and Kellerman deserves what's coming to him. The next day was a blur of preparation. We worked from Gloria's hotel room, spread across 2 beds and a small desk, building our case piece by piece. I'd brought my laptop and portable printer. Court documents covered every surface. The timing is crucial, Gloria said, highlighting a section of transcript. We let Riggs commit to his original testimony, then hit him with the video. No warning. I nodded, uploading the authenticated video to a secure drive. I've got the transcript ready for side-by-side comparison. His sworn statement versus what the video shows. Good. Gloria stretched, wincing slightly. We need to prepare for pushback. Kellerman won't go down without a fight. Let him try, I said, surprising myself with the steel in my voice. I'm not afraid of him anymore. Gloria gave me an appraising look. You've changed, counselor. Having your son wrongfully imprisoned will do that. We worked until nearly midnight, going over every detail, anticipating every counter-argument. The hearing was set for 9 a.m. We were as ready as we'd ever be. Get some sleep, Gloria said, shooing me toward the door. Tomorrow's going to be a long day. I headed back to my motel, too wired to sleep but too exhausted to do anything else. I lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling, rehearsing arguments in my head. Around 2 a.m., my phone buzzed with a text from Gloria. Someone's watching my room, security doing a sweep, be careful. I texted back immediately. Want me to come over? Number stay put. Just be ready in case we need to move the files. Sleep was impossible after that. I checked the locks twice, then pulled a chair against the door. Just before dawn, my phone rang. Marcus. Gloria's voice was tight. Someone slipped a note under my door. My pulse quickened. What does it say? Don't show up. That's it. She paused. There's a car that's been sitting in the parking lot all night. Dark sedan, tinted windows. I'm coming to get you. Number, that's what they want. We separate. We're vulnerable. Her voice hardened. I'm not missing this hearing. Not after everything. At least let me send a police escort. Who do you think is watching me? She cut me off. Meet me at the courthouse, side entrance, 8:15 sharp. She hung up before I could argue. I dressed quickly, packed my laptop and files, and checked out of the motel. The parking lot was empty except for my car, but I still checked underneath it before getting in. The morning was gray and drizzling as I drove to the courthouse. Every red light felt like an eternity. Every car behind me a potential threat. But Gloria was right. We couldn't back down now. Not when we were so close. The courthouse steps were already crowded with reporters when I arrived. I parked 2 blocks away and walked, keeping my head down. The side entrance was quieter, just a security guard checking IDs. At exactly 8:15, Gloria appeared, striding purposefully down the sidewalk. She wore a crisp navy suit, her braids coiled at the nape of her neck. If she was frightened, it didn't show. Ready? She asked when she reached me. I nodded, clutching my briefcase. Ready. Together, we walked through the doors, prepared for the fight of our lives. The courtroom felt like a battlefield as we entered. I could feel the weight of every eye, the heaviness of what we were about to do. Jamal sat at the defense table, orange jumpsuit stark against the polished wood. He looked thinner than when I'd last seen him, his eyes holding a wariness that hadn't been there before. When he saw me, a flicker of hope crossed his face, a hope I couldn't bear to disappoint again. Gloria nudged me gently. "Focus, Marcus," she whispered. "We're about to change everything." I nodded, taking my seat. Across the aisle, the prosecution team huddled with Officer Riggs. He looked confident, relaxed even, a man who'd testified dozens of times before and never been challenged. His badge caught the fluorescent light as he shifted, a glint of authority that had once intimidated me. Not today. Judge Kellerman entered and we all rose. His face was a mask of judicial impartiality, but I could see the cold calculation behind his eyes as he surveyed the packed courtroom. "Be seated," he intoned, his voice carrying that familiar authoritative resonance. "We're here regarding the appeal of State v. Wells. I understand new evidence has been submitted?" Our attorney stood. "Yes, Your Honor, the defense would like to present video evidence that directly contradicts sworn testimony given during the original trial." Kellerman's eyes narrowed slightly. "Proceed." That was our cue. Gloria stood and wheeled in the projector we'd arranged to have ready. I could see Kellerman's eyebrows rise, a flicker of disdain crossing his features. "Really, Ms. Saunders, a projector? This isn't a high school presentation," he said, drawing scattered laughter from the gallery. Gloria didn't miss a beat. "Sometimes old school is the most reliable, Your Honor. No internet connections to fail, no compatibility issues." Her voice was smooth as silk, but I could hear the steel underneath. Besides, I believe what we're about to show speaks for itself regardless of the medium. I watched Riggs as Gloria set up. His posture had changed, a new tension in his shoulders. When she connected my laptop and the first frame appeared on the wall, I saw it. The moment of recognition. His face drained of color, leaving him ashen under the fluorescent lights. "If I may direct the court's attention," Gloria said, stepping to the side of the screen. "This is surveillance footage from the corner of Maple and 42nd, the night of the murder. The timestamp is clearly visible in the bottom right corner." The footage played in silence, grainy but unmistakable. The street corner, the muzzle flash. And then, the shooter stepping into view. Not Jamal. Devin Marlowe, Detective Marlowe's nephew. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. I kept my eyes on Riggs. Sweat had beaded on his forehead now, his right leg bouncing nervously under the table. Gloria paused the video. "Now, if we compare the timestamp with Officer Riggs's sworn testimony," she clicked to a slide showing the transcript. Officer Riggs stated under oath that he was not at the scene until 10:47 p.m., responding to the 911 call. She clicked back to the video, advancing it frame by frame until Riggs himself appeared in view. The timestamp read 10:32 p.m. "As you can see," Gloria continued, her voice carrying clearly through the now silent courtroom, "Officer Riggs was not only present before the 911 call was placed, but he appears to be speaking with the actual shooter." Kellerman's gavel came down hard. "This is highly irregular. Where did this footage come from? What's the chain of custody? This could be doctored for all we know." I stood then, finding my voice. "Your Honor, the footage was authenticated by 2 independent digital forensics experts." I handed copies of their reports to the bailiff. "The original was obtained anonymously, but its authenticity is not in question." "I'll be the judge of what's in question in my courtroom," Kellerman snapped, but I could see the calculation behind his eyes. He was cornered, and he knew it. "Your Honor," came a new voice. The court clerk, Mrs. Henderson, had risen from her desk. A woman who'd worked in this courthouse for 30 years, known for her meticulous record-keeping and unimpeachable integrity. "If I may?" Kellerman looked startled. "Mrs. Henderson?" "I can confirm the validity of this evidence," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "It matches the security footage that was logged into evidence but never presented at trial. I have the original catalog numbers here." She held up a folder. "I've maintained copies of all evidence logs for the past 15 years. This footage was entered but subsequently marked not relevant by Detective Marlowe." The courtroom erupted. Riggs shot to his feet, his face now flushed with anger. The prosecution team was in disarray. Kellerman banged his gavel repeatedly, calling for order, but the momentum had shifted. I looked at Jamal. For the first time in months, I saw a real smile break across his face. His eyes glistened with unshed tears. When order was finally restored, Kellerman looked like he'd aged a decade in minutes. His voice was tight as he spoke. In light of this unexpected evidence, I have no choice but to suspend the conviction pending a full review. He glared at me, at Gloria, at Mrs. Henderson. This court will reconvene in 2 weeks, during which time a complete investigation into this new evidence will be conducted. The gavel came down one final time. "Mr. Wells," he said, nodding to Jamal, "your custody status will be reevaluated. Bail hearing tomorrow morning." The courtroom exploded again, this time with cheers. I pushed past the barrier and embraced my son, feeling his thin frame shake with emotion against mine. "It's not over," I whispered to him, "but we've got them on the run now." The next 48 hours were a blur of motions, hearings, and frantic legal maneuvering. I barely slept. Gloria and I worked through the night preparing arguments, while the prosecution scrambled to salvage what was left of their case. The media circus outside the courthouse grew by the hour. When we walked into Judge Carrington's courtroom, Kellerman had been forced to recuse himself. I felt a strange calm settle over me. This was it, the culmination of everything. The courtroom was packed to capacity. I spotted reporters from national networks, civil rights activists, and even a few of my former colleagues from the DA's office. Some couldn't meet my eyes. Others nodded slightly, silent acknowledgement of what we all knew now. Judge Carrington was a no-nonsense woman in her 60s with a reputation for fairness that even Kellerman's cronies respected. She'd spent the previous day reviewing all the evidence, both what had been presented at trial and what had been suppressed. "Before I rule on the defense's motion," she began, "I want to make something perfectly clear. This court has reviewed not only the surveillance footage, but also the additional evidence that has come to light regarding witness intimidation, evidence tampering, and potential perjury by officers of the court." She looked directly at the prosecution table. "What I have seen disturbs me greatly. The integrity of our justice system relies on the honest pursuit of truth. When that pursuit is corrupted, we all suffer." My heart hammered in my chest. Beside me, Gloria squeezed my arm. "Therefore," Judge Carrington continued, "I am denying the prosecution's request for a retrial. Furthermore, I am vacating Jamal Wells's conviction, effective immediately." The courtroom erupted. I sat stunned, barely registering the chaos around me. "Order!" Judge Carrington's voice cut through the noise. When quiet returned, she continued, "Mr. Wells is to be released within 72 hours. All charges are dismissed with prejudice. This case is closed." The gavel came down with a crack that seemed to echo through my bones. Gloria turned to me, tears streaming down her face. "We did it," she whispered. "We actually did it." I couldn't speak. All I could think about was Jamal. My son was coming home. The next 3 days were the longest of my life. There were papers to file, procedures to follow, bureaucratic hoops to jump through. The system that had swallowed my son so eagerly now seemed reluctant to spit him back out. But on the morning of the 3rd day, I stood outside the gates of Central Detention, waiting. A small crowd had gathered, reporters with cameras, supporters with signs. Gloria stood beside me, both of us silent with anticipation. The metal door opened with a harsh clang, and there he was. Jamal stepped out, blinking in the bright sunlight. He looked thinner than I remembered, his shoulders hunched slightly, his eyes wary. He wore the clothes we'd sent in for him, jeans and a button-down shirt that now hung loose on his frame. For a moment, he just stood there, taking it all in. Then his eyes found mine. I moved toward him, pushing past the reporters who shouted questions. When I reached him, I stopped, suddenly uncertain. It had been months. What if he blamed me? What if he couldn't forgive me for not protecting him? Jamal closed the distance between us. His arms went around me and I felt him shudder against my chest. I held him tight, my own tears falling freely now. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "I'm so sorry it took so long." He pulled back, his eyes red but dry. "You never stopped fighting. I knew you wouldn't. The embrace was awkward, tearful, and mostly silent, but it was everything. My son was free. That was all that mattered in that moment. The reporters swarmed us as we walked to the car. Microphones thrust in our faces, cameras flashing. I shielded Jamal as best I could, repeating no comment like a mantra. Once inside the car with the doors closed against the chaos, Jamal let out a long breath. Is it always going to be like this? No, I promised him. This will die down. But first, we have to finish what we started. He looked at me questioningly. Kellerman, Marlowe, Riggs, they don't get to walk away from this. The next morning, while Jamal slept in his own bed for the first time in months, I filed formal ethics charges against Judge Harold Kellerman with the Judicial Conduct Committee. The 20-page complaint detailed every instance of misconduct we'd uncovered, from suppressing evidence to showing clear bias in rulings. I followed that with a criminal complaint against Detective Marlowe and Officer Riggs, charging them with evidence tampering, witness intimidation, and perjury. I hand-delivered both complaints, wanting to see the faces of the clerks as they realized who I was and what I was filing. When I got home, Jamal was in the kitchen making breakfast. Such a simple thing, watching my son crack eggs into a bowl, but it nearly broke me all over again. I filed the complaints this morning, I told him, sitting at the counter. He nodded, focused on the eggs. What happens now? Now we wait. The wheels turn slowly, but they're turning. Kellerman will fight it, of course. So will Marlowe and Riggs. But we've got them. The evidence is too strong. Jamal looked up at me, his expression serious. And then what? When it's all over? I hadn't thought that far ahead. For so long, my only goal had been getting him out. Then we rebuild, I said finally. Both of us. He turned back to the stove, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. I still want to go to law school, you know. More than ever, actually. Pride swelled in my chest, mingled with a deep ache for all he'd lost. You'll make one hell of a lawyer. I had a good teacher, he said quietly. Outside, I could hear reporters still camped at the end of our driveway. The road ahead would be long. There would be investigations, possibly trials. The system that had failed my son wouldn't change overnight. But Jamal was home. That was the first victory. And I was determined it wouldn't be the last. I've never been one to watch the news. Not since that day in the courtroom when reporters captured my breakdown like vultures. But in the weeks following Jamal's release, I couldn't escape it. The fallout was everywhere, on TV screens, in coffee shops, on newspaper stands, on people's lips as I walked past. Judge Harold Kellerman taken into custody this morning. The image of Kellerman in handcuffs being led down the courthouse steps played on every local channel. His face, once so smug and self-assured, now ashen with shock. The man who had sentenced my son to life in prison with a smile was facing his own reckoning. The charges against him were extensive: judicial misconduct, conspiracy to obstruct justice, evidence tampering, and more. The investigation had uncovered a pattern of corruption spanning decades. Cases were being reopened. Lives that he had casually destroyed were being re-examined. I should have felt vindicated watching him fall. Instead, I felt hollow. No amount of justice could give Jamal back those months in prison. No punishment could erase the nightmares that still woke him screaming. Officer Riggs didn't wait for the axe to fall. He resigned in disgrace the day after the hearing, a terse statement from his lawyer claiming personal reasons. The coward couldn't even face the music. His police union abandoned him when the evidence became irrefutable. Last I heard, he'd left the state. Detective Marlowe, though, he went down fighting. Charged with obstruction of justice and conspiracy, he maintained his innocence even as the evidence mounted against him. His nephew Devin had already cut a deal, flipping on his uncle in exchange for a reduced sentence in the murder Jamal had been accused of. "This is a witch hunt," Marlowe told reporters outside his arraignment. "Wells has a vendetta. This is personal." He wasn't entirely wrong. It was personal. It had been from the moment they put my son in handcuffs. The media circus grew more frenzied with each new development. News outlets that had once plastered Jamal's mugshot across their front pages, that had called him a thug, and worse, now wanted exclusive interviews. They camped outside our house, called my cell phone at all hours, even approached Jamal at the grocery store. "Mr. Wells, how does it feel to bring down a corrupt judge? Jamal, will you tell us about your experience in prison? Are you planning to sue the city? Experts say you could get millions." I gave them nothing, not a sound bite, not a quote, not a single on-camera moment. They'd feasted on our pain once before. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction again. Gloria, on the other hand, gave interviews to select outlets, those who had shown integrity in their reporting from the beginning. She became the public face of our fight, speaking eloquently about systemic injustice and the need for reform. She was better at it than I would have been. I was still too angry, too raw. "You should consider talking to them," she told me over coffee one morning. "Your story could help others." I shook my head. I'm done with public spectacles. I want to build something now, not tear things down. And that's exactly what I intended to do. 3 weeks after Jamal's release, while Kellerman was being processed into the county jail to await trial, I signed a lease on a dusty storefront downtown. It had been a travel agency once, then a cell phone repair shop. Now it would be something else entirely. The space needed work, new paint, new flooring, proper wiring for computers. But I could see its potential. Large windows facing the street, an open floor plan, even a small kitchen in the back. Room to grow. Jamal came with me to see it, running his hand along the dirty windowsill, peering into the empty back offices. "What do you think?" I asked him. He turned slowly, taking it all in. "It's perfect," he said. "But Dad, are you sure about this? The DA's office would take you back in a heartbeat now." I shook my head. I'm done with that chapter. I can't go back to being part of a system I know is broken. "So instead, we're going to fix it, just the two of us?" There was a hint of a smile on his face. "Well, not just the two of us." I pulled a business card from my pocket and handed it to him. It was simple, elegant. Black text on cream cardstock, Wells & Wells, civil rights attorneys. And beneath that, both our names, Marcus Wells and Jamal Wells. His eyes widened. "Dad, I haven't even started law school yet." "You will," I said. "And when you graduate, your name will already be on the door." He traced his finger over the embossed letters of his name. I could see he was fighting back tears. "In the meantime," I continued, "I'll start building the practice. Gloria's agreed to consult. We'll focus on cases like yours, people who've been wronged by the system. And when you're ready, you'll join me." Jamal looked up from the card, his eyes shining. "We're really doing this." "We really are." I put my arm around his shoulders. "The lease is signed. Renovations start next week." As we stood there in that empty space, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Hope. Not just for Jamal's future, or for mine, but for all the people we might be able to help. All the lives we might be able to change. Outside, a news van drove slowly past the window, probably looking for us. But they wouldn't find what they were after. Our story wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about rebuilding. About creating something meaningful from the wreckage. The real work was just beginning. A week passed faster than I could have imagined. The contractors worked double shifts, a favor called in from an old client, and transformed that dusty storefront into something dignified. Nothing fancy, mind you. No marble columns or mahogany paneling like the big firms downtown. But it was clean, professional, honest. I stood outside on the sidewalk early that morning, coffee in hand, staring at our new beginning. The morning sun caught the freshly cleaned windows, making them gleam. The sign above the door was simple but bold. Wells & Wells. Seeing our names together like that made my chest tighten with pride. Jamal was meeting me at 9. He'd been staying at my place since his release, sleeping in his old bedroom that I'd kept unchanged all those months. We'd fallen into an uneasy rhythm, both of us tiptoeing around certain topics, both pretending we were okay. He hadn't talked much about his time inside, and I hadn't pushed. Some wounds need time before they can be exposed to air. At exactly 9, I spotted him walking down the block. He moved differently now, more deliberate, more aware of his surroundings. Prison changes a man's gait, makes him walk like he's always watching his back. "Morning," he said, stopping beside me on the sidewalk. He was dressed in new clothes, dark jeans, a button-down shirt. His mother would have been proud to see him looking so handsome. "Ready for the grand tour?" I asked, pulling out the keys. He nodded, eyes fixed on the sign. "Still feels unreal," he said quietly. I unlocked the door and held it open for him. "After you, counselor." The smell of fresh paint and new carpet greeted us as we stepped inside. The main area was open and bright, with 2 desks facing each other and a small waiting area near the front. I'd kept the design simple: white walls, blue carpet, functional furniture. Nothing to distract from the work we'd be doing. "This is yours," I said, leading him to the desk by the window. It was a solid piece, oak with clean lines. On top sat a new laptop, a desk lamp, and a small plaque that read, "Jamal Wells, J.D., pending." Jamal picked up the plaque, running his fingers across his name. I watched his face carefully, trying to read his reaction. "You don't have to wait until you finish law school to start making a difference," I told him. "You've got experience none of those professors have. You lived it." He set the plaque down carefully, precisely aligning it with the edge of the desk. "What exactly would I be doing? I'm not qualified to practice." "Research, client interviews. You'd be my paralegal officially, but really, you'd be my partner in everything but name. Your perspective is invaluable, Jamal. You see things I miss?" I showed him the rest of the office. My desk across from his, the small conference room in back, the kitchenette with a coffee maker and mini fridge. It wasn't much, but it was a start. "The bathroom's through there," I said, pointing to a door near the back. "And this." I opened another door to reveal a small room with a couch, a lamp, and a bookshelf. "Is for when we need a moment to breathe." Jamal stood in the center of the main room, taking it all in. I couldn't read his expression. "What do you think?" I finally asked. He turned to me, his face serious. "It's perfect, Dad." But what? Are you sure about this? About me?" He hesitated. "I'm not the same person I was before." I moved closer to him, wishing I could bridge the gap between us as easily as crossing the room. "I know that. I wouldn't expect you to be. Some days I can barely get out of bed. Other days I'm so angry I can't see straight. How am I supposed to help anyone like this?" I gestured to the chairs in the waiting area. "Sit with me a minute." We sat facing each other, knees almost touching. I leaned forward, choosing my words carefully. "Jamal, you don't owe anyone your silence anymore. Not me, not the clients who'll come through that door, not yourself. What happened to you was wrong. Brutally, criminally wrong. And if you need to scream about it or cry about it or just sit quietly with it, that's your right." He looked down at his hands. "I don't know how to talk about it yet." "Then don't. But know that when you're ready, I'm here to listen. And in the meantime, your experience, all of it, makes you exactly the right person to be in this room when someone walks in with their world falling apart." Jamal didn't reply, but I saw the answer in his smile. Small but genuine. The first real smile I'd seen since before the trial. It was a start. "So," I said, standing up, "partners?" He stood and extended his hand. "Partners." We shook on it, and for a moment I saw a flash of the boy he'd been, confident, hopeful, unbroken. He was still in there, beneath the layers of pain and caution. My son, my partner. "Let's get to work," I said. I fumbled with my keys at the front door, exhaustion settling into my bones after the long day showing Jamal our new office. The house was quiet and dark, just as I'd left it that morning. I flipped on the lights and saw the envelope immediately. Official state letterhead sitting square in the middle of the coffee table where the mail carrier must have slid it through the mail slot. My name was printed in stark black letters, Marcus Wells. I knew what it was before I even touched it. The ethics board moves quickly when one of their own breaks ranks. I'd been expecting this since the day I leaked the footage. Still, seeing it there, so official, so final, made my stomach clench. I dropped my keys and jacket on the couch and picked up the envelope. It felt heavy in my hands, weighted with consequences. I carried it to the kitchen, poured myself 2 fingers of bourbon, and sat at the table. The seal broke with a crisp tear. I unfolded the letter and read, Re-Ethics Investigation Number 23-789, Marcus Wells, District Attorney. The words blurred together at first. Phrases jumped out at me. Professional misconduct, breach of prosecutorial ethics, mishandling of evidence, public statements undermining the judicial process. I took a long sip of bourbon, feeling the burn in my throat, and read it again more carefully. They were investigating me for leaking evidence, for publicly challenging Judge Kellerman's court, for abandoning my duty to the state in favor of my personal interests. The letter concluded with a hearing date 6 weeks from now, and a list of potential sanctions, up to and including disbarment. 23 years as a prosecutor, gone. I should have felt devastated. This career had been my identity for so long, but as I sat there, letter in one hand and bourbon in the other, I felt something unexpected, relief. I read the letter a 3rd time, committing the details to memory. Then I reached for the matchbook I kept by the stove for lighting the pilot light. I struck a match, held the flame to the corner of the paper, and watched as it caught. The fire crawled up the page, consuming the words, the threats, the end of my career. I dropped the burning letter into the sink and watched until it was nothing but ash. Then I turned on the tap and washed the remains down the drain. I'd made my choice weeks ago the moment I saw that video of Devin at the crime scene. I'd chosen my son over my badge, justice over the system, truth over power. What I'd lost was just paper and prestige. What I'd gained was my soul back. I finished my drink and went to bed, sleeping more soundly than I had in months. The next morning I woke before dawn, an old habit from years of early court appearances that I couldn't seem to break. I made coffee, strong and black, and carried it out to the porch. The air was cool, the sky just beginning to lighten at the edges. I settled into one of the 2 rocking chairs and watched the neighborhood slowly come to life. A newspaper delivery car rolled by. A jogger in reflective gear made her way down the sidewalk. Normal life continuing all around us, even as our world had been torn apart and rebuilt. The screen door creaked behind me. I turned to see Jamal standing there wearing sweatpants and a t-shirt, his own mug of coffee in hand. He looked tired. He always looked tired these days. But there was something else there too, a steadiness I hadn't seen since before his arrest. "Mind if I join you?" he asked. I gestured to the empty chair beside me. "It's your porch too." He sat down, and we rocked in silence for a while, sipping our coffee as the sky shifted from black to deep blue to the pale lavender of approaching dawn. "I heard you come in late last night," he said finally. I nodded. "Had some things to take care of after we left the office." "Everything okay?" I considered lying, protecting him from one more burden. But we'd had enough secrets between us. "The ethics board is investigating me," I said. "Probably going to lose my license." Jamal's rocking stopped. "Because of what you did for me?" "Because of what I did for justice," I corrected him. "You were just the case that finally opened my eyes." He was quiet for a long moment. "I'm sorry." "Don't be, I'm not." The first rays of sunlight broke over the horizon, painting the clouds in pink and gold. We watched together as day pushed back the darkness. "What will you do?" Jamal asked. I shrugged. "Practice law until they tell me I can't. Fight the charges maybe. Or maybe just accept it and move on. There are other ways to make a difference." "Like our firm." "Like our firm," I agreed. "With or without my license, we've got work to do." We fell silent again, rocking gently as the sun rose higher. Birds began to sing in the trees. A neighbor's car started. I glanced over at my son. In the soft morning light, I could see traces of the boy he'd been and glimpses of the man he was becoming. Despite everything, the wrongful conviction, The months in prison, the trauma that would never fully heal. He was here. We were here. Together. Whatever came next, the ethics hearing, rebuilding our lives, fighting for others caught in the same corrupt system, we would face it side by side. I'd lost my career, my reputation, my standing in the legal community. But sitting there with Jamal as the new day dawned, I knew I'd made the right choice. Some prices are worth paying, and it took us 3 weeks to get the office in working order. We painted the walls ourselves, a warm beige that Jamal picked out. I installed shelving while he assembled the furniture. Every evening we'd lock up and walk home together, our hands stained with paint or wood stain, muscles aching from honest work. There was something healing in the physical labor, in creating something with our hands after so many months of destruction. The day we officially opened for business, I arrived early. The morning light streamed through our freshly cleaned windows, casting long rectangles across the hardwood floor. I stood in the doorway of my office, smaller than my old one at the DA's, but somehow more mine than that one had ever been. I pulled a framed photograph from my messenger bag and unwrapped it carefully from its protective cloth. It was a simple shot, taken by Gloria on her phone. Jamal walking out of the detention center, blinking in the sunlight, my hand on his shoulder. Both of us looking shell-shocked but alive. It wasn't a happy moment exactly, more like the first breath after nearly drowning, but it was the moment everything changed, when we got our second chance. I hung it on the wall beside my desk, adjusting it until it sat perfectly level. Then I stepped back and looked at it for a long time. First decoration? Jamal's voice came from behind me. He stood in the doorway, 2 coffee cups in hand. I nodded. Seemed appropriate. He handed me one of the coffees and stepped closer to examine the photo. His face gave nothing away, but I saw his throat work as he swallowed. "That was a weird day," he said finally. "Yeah." I kept thinking they were going to change their minds, put me back inside. I reached out and squeezed his shoulder. "Not while I'm breathing." He gave me a small smile and turned away, moving toward his own office across the hall. I watched him go, this son of mine who had aged years and months, who carried himself with a new caution, who still woke up gasping some nights, the ghost of prison walls closing in. But he was here, working, living. That was enough for now. Our first client came in that afternoon, a nervous woman with a teenage son who'd been arrested for a crime that sounded suspiciously similar to what Jamal had faced. She recognized us from the news. "I don't have much money," she said, twisting her purse strap between her fingers. "But I heard you might... that you understand?" "We do," Jamal said, speaking up before I could. "And we'll help." I watched my son as he took notes, asked questions, reassured the woman. He'd been sitting in on my cases since he was in high school, but this was different. This wasn't academic interest. This was personal. When they left, Jamal sat at his desk reviewing his notes with intense concentration. "What do you think?" I asked from his doorway. He looked up at me, his eyes clear and determined. "I think they're trying to railroad another kid, and I think we're not going to let them." Pride swelled in my chest. "No," I agreed. "We're not." The next week brought more clients. Word was spreading in the community. People who didn't trust the system but might trust us. The man who'd broken it open, and the son who'd survived it. We worked long hours building cases, filing motions, making calls. It wasn't glamorous work, but it felt right in a way prosecuting never had. This was what justice was supposed to look like, fighting for those who couldn't fight for themselves. One morning, a delivery arrived, a large gift basket wrapped in cellophane and tied with a bright red bow. I carried it into my office and found the card tucked among the fruit and chocolates. "You kept the fire burning, don't let it go out, G." I smiled, picturing Gloria's fierce eyes and no-nonsense demeanor. She'd moved to her sister's place in Maryland after the dust settled, needing some distance from the city and its memories. But she checked in regularly, sending articles about our cases and suggestions for legal strategies. I placed the basket on the credenza beside the framed photo of Jamal's release. 2 reminders of how we'd gotten here and why we kept going. Later that afternoon, I found Jamal standing in my office looking at the photo and the gift basket. Gloria? He asked, nodding at the basket. Yeah, says we're keeping the fire burning. He nodded thoughtfully. She was something else, wasn't she? Standing up to Kellerman like that in court. She was fighting that battle long before we came along, I said. We just helped finish what she started. Jamal ran his finger along the frame of the photo. Do you ever regret it? What it cost you? I thought about my suspended law license, the ethics hearing scheduled for next month, the former colleagues who wouldn't meet my eyes when we passed in the courthouse hallways. Not for a second, I said honestly. He nodded, seeming satisfied with my answer. We've got that hearing at 2. I'll grab the files. I watched him walk out, his movements more confident than they'd been even a week ago. Then I looked back at the photo and the gift basket, symbols of our journey and the people who'd helped us along the way. This wasn't the life I'd planned, but watching my son reclaim his future, seeing clients leave our office with hope instead of despair, it was better than anything I could have imagined. We had found our rhythm, our purpose, our new normal, and it was quiet, it was warm, and God knows it was hard-earned. The phone rang just as I was finishing up some paperwork. Our receptionist, Tamika, a retired court clerk who'd volunteered to help us get started, poked her head into my office. It's Channel 8 News, she said. Reporter named Diane Chen. Says it's urgent. I sighed, putting down my pen. The calls had been coming for weeks now. Local stations, national outlets, even a few documentary filmmakers. They all wanted the same thing. My take on the latest scandal rocking the justice system. Tell her I'm in court, I said. Tamika raised an eyebrow. You sure? Sounds like something big is breaking. I'm sure. I gestured at the stack of files on my desk. These cases won't prepare themselves. She nodded and disappeared. A moment later, I heard her polite but firm voice explaining that Mr. Wells was unavailable for comment. I turned back to my work, but my concentration was shot. Whatever was happening, it would find its way to us eventually. News always did these days. Sure enough, my phone buzzed with a text from Gloria. Turn on Channel 8, now. I reached for the small TV we kept in the corner of my office and switched it on. Diane Chen stood outside the county courthouse, microphone in hand, her expression grave. Sources confirm that District Attorney William Prescott has been implicated in a scheme to suppress evidence in at least 12 major cases over the past decade. Judge Raymond Thornton, who presided over 9 of these cases, is also under investigation. Internal documents suggest a pattern of targeted prosecutions against minority defendants. My stomach tightened. Prescott. He ran the neighboring county's DA office, a man I'd worked with on joint prosecutions more than once. And Thornton, another law and order judge cut from the same cloth as Kellerman. The camera panned to show protesters gathering on the courthouse steps, holding signs demanding justice and accountability. It was a scene I knew all too well. This scandal bears striking similarities to the Kellerman case that rocked our community last year, Chen continued. In that instance, former District Attorney Marcus Wells exposed widespread corruption that led to the wrongful conviction of his own son. I muted the TV as footage of Jamal's release played across the screen. I'd seen enough. The pattern was repeating itself. Different players, same ugly game. My phone rang again. This time I checked the caller ID before answering. It was Gloria. You seeing this? She asked without preamble. Yeah. It's happening again, Marcus. Same playbook, different county. I rubbed my temples, feeling a headache forming. I know. Chen's been trying to reach you. She wants a statement. I'm not giving statements anymore, Gloria. I'm just trying to run a law firm. She was quiet for a moment. These people need someone who understands the system from the inside. Someone who's fought this battle before. They'll find their champion, I said. It doesn't have to be me. After we hung up, I sat staring at the muted TV. More footage of protests, tearful families, officials denying everything, the cycle continuing. My door opened and Jamal walked in with a legal pad in hand. He glanced at the TV, then back at me. Prescott and Thornton, he said. It wasn't a question. I nodded. News is breaking now. He set the pad down on my desk and crossed his arms. Chen's called 3 times. Tamika's running out of excuses. I'm not interested in being the face of another crusade, I said. We have work to do here. Jamal studied me for a moment, then looked at the TV. They were showing side-by-side photos of Judge Thornton and Judge Kellerman now. 2 stern-faced men in black robes, wielding power like a weapon. You know, he said quietly, there's a kid sitting in Ravenwood right now because of Thornton, just like I was. The words hung in the air between us. I didn't need the reminder. I knew exactly what was at stake. I'd lived it. What would you have me do? I asked. Drop everything and jump back into the spotlight? Jamal turned to face me fully. No, he said, but I might. I blinked, surprised. What? Maybe it's my turn now, he said, his voice steady and clear. I know what it's like to be that kid. I know what Thornton and Prescott are capable of. I can speak to this in a way even you can't. Something shifted in my chest, a loosening, a warming. I studied my son's face, seeing not just determination there, but purpose. He wasn't asking my permission. He was making a decision. You sure about this? I asked. Once you step into this, there's no stepping back. Trust me. He nodded. I'm sure. I've been thinking about it since the first rumors started last week. These families need someone who understands both sides, the legal process and what it feels like to be crushed by it. I stood up and walked around my desk, leaning against it as I faced him. It won't be easy. The spotlight can be brutal. I know, he said, but someone has to do it. Someone has to speak for those kids. I felt it then, that thing I'd almost forgotten existed. Hope. Not the desperate kind that had kept me going during Jamal's incarceration, but something stronger, clearer. Hope in the next generation picking up the fight. All right, I said. If you're sure, I'll call Chen back. Jamal shook his head. Number, I'll call her myself. He turned to leave, then paused at the door. Dad, thanks for everything. After he left, I unmuted the TV. The news had moved on to other stories, but I knew we'd be back on it soon enough. This time, though, it would be Jamal's voice they heard, Jamal's story, Jamal's fight, and I would be right behind him every step of the way. That night I dreamed of courtrooms. Not the nightmare versions that had haunted me for months, the ones where Jamal stood in chains while Kellerman sneered from the bench. This dream felt different, lighter somehow. I stood in a sunlit courtroom, windows open to let in fresh air. The gallery was filled with faces I recognized, Gloria, some of our clients, reporters who'd helped break the story. But the bench was empty. No judge sat in judgment. Then Jamal walked in, dressed not in prison orange but in a sharp charcoal suit. He moved with confidence toward the judge's bench, climbed the steps, and took the seat. All rise, someone called, and I realized it was me. I woke with a start, my heart pounding but not with fear. Something else. Pride, maybe, or possibility. The early morning light filtered through my blinds as I lay there, letting the dreams settle into my bones. For the first time in over a year, I didn't immediately reach for case files or my phone. I just breathed. Coffee was brewing when my phone finally rang. Gloria's name flashed on the screen. You're up early, I said, wedging the phone between my ear and shoulder as I poured a cup. Some of us never stopped being early risers, she replied. I could hear the smile in her voice. Not like you fancy former DAs who can sleep in. 7 a.m. is hardly sleeping in, I protested, but I was smiling too. I've got news, she said. I took my coffee to the porch. The morning was cool, dew still clinging to the grass. Good or bad? I've had enough bad to last a lifetime. Good, I think. She paused. I've been offered a consultancy position with the State Justice Reform Commission. I nearly spilled my coffee. Gloria, that's incredible. It's just getting started, she cautioned. But they want someone who knows where the bodies are buried. And you've got a map, I said, and damn right I do. Her voice turned serious. They mentioned your name too, Marcus. Said what you did woke people up, made them pay attention. I watched a cardinal land on my bird feeder, its red feathers bright against the green of the yard. I was just trying to save my son. And you exposed a cancer in the system while doing it, Gloria said. Don't minimize that. We talked a while longer about the commission, about what she might be able to accomplish. When we hung up, I sat watching that cardinal until it flew away, thinking about ripples in ponds, about how actions spread outward in ways you can't predict. Back inside, I heard Jamal moving around in the kitchen. He was dressed already, sorting through papers at the table. Morning, I said, refilling my cup. You're up early. Meeting with Chen at 9, he said. We're going over my statement for the press conference. I nodded, trying to keep my face neutral. Ever since Jamal had decided to speak out about the Thornton case, I'd been fighting twin instincts, pride in his courage, and fear for what it might cost him. You need a ride? I asked. He shook his head. Got the car service coming. Figured you might want to work from home today. I can come with you, I offered, if you want backup. Jamal looked up from his papers, studying me. Dad, I've got this. Really? I know you do, I said, and I meant it. He went back to his notes, and I watched him for a moment. My son, who'd spent 18 months in prison for a crime he didn't commit. My son, who'd lost part of his youth to a corrupt system. My son, who was choosing to fight back rather than run away. I had a weird dream last night, I said suddenly. Jamal glanced up. Yeah? You were a judge. He laughed, a quick bright sound. Me? No way. Why not? I asked. You've seen the system from both sides now. That gives you perspective most judges never get. He set his pen down, considering. Never thought about it like that. You've got choices now, Jamal, I said. Real ones. Law school, advocacy work, politics if you want it. Doors that Kellerman tried to close forever. I just want to help that kid in Ravenwood, he said quietly. The rest can wait. His phone buzzed, the car service arriving early. He gathered his papers, tucked them into a leather portfolio I'd given him last week. You sure you don't want me to come? I asked one more time. Jamal stopped at the door, turning back. I'm sure. This part I need to do alone. After he left, I stood in the quiet kitchen, feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time. Possibility stretching out before us, not just for Jamal, but for others like him, for the system itself. I didn't know what was next for me. My career as DA was over, and the small practice Jamal and I had started was just finding its feet. The ethics investigation was still ongoing, though the public support had taken most of the sting out of it. But I knew this. My son had choices now, real ones. And maybe, just maybe, our fight had created space for other sons and daughters to have choices too. The cardinal returned to the feeder outside my window, bringing a friend this time. I watched them for a while, these bright spots of color against the morning, and allowed myself to feel, just for a moment, like we'd done something that mattered. I placed the fresh coffee on Jamal's desk, careful not to disturb the neat stacks of legal briefs he'd been working through since dawn. The rich aroma filled our modest office, a scent that had become part of our morning ritual over these past few months. Jamal didn't look up immediately, his focus laser-sharp on the document before him, pen moving steadily as he made notes in the margins. You take cream today? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Black. Always black these days. My son had developed a taste for bitter things in prison. No, thanks, he murmured, finally glancing up with a quick smile that reminded me of his childhood, fleeting, but genuine. This Garza case is something else. The transcript alone. I nodded, moving to my own desk by the window. Outside, the city was coming alive. Morning traffic built steadily along the avenue below, people hurrying to jobs, to appointments, to lives uninterrupted by the kind of nightmare we'd survived. Delivery trucks double-parked. A street vendor set up his coffee cart. 2 paralegals from the firm across the street laughed as they dodged a puddle from last night's rain. Normal life, happening all around us. Inside our office, Jamal flipped another page, his movements precise and economical. No wasted energy. That was new too. This careful conservation of himself. Before Kellerman, before Ravenwood loomed on the horizon, my son had been all loose limbs and easy laughter. Now he moved like someone who'd learned the true cost of everything. Judge Mercer is fair, I said, watching him work. She'll look at the evidence objectively. Jamal nodded without looking up. That's what I'm counting on. But the precedent from Commonwealth versus Daniels could be a problem. I leaned back in my chair, a small smile playing at my lips. My boy, talking case law over morning coffee. It wasn't the path I'd imagined for him. He'd been headed for engineering before all this. But there was something right about it nonetheless, like the universe had corrected itself, setting us back on course after that terrible detour. My eyes landed on the framed photo on my desk. Jamal standing outside the prison, blinking in the sunlight, my arm around his shoulders. His face in that moment, part disbelief, part exhaustion, part fragile hope. The photographer had caught something raw and true. Not triumph exactly, but survival. The beginning of healing. A sunbeam broke through the blinds, catching the side of Jamal's face as he worked. It illuminated him in profile. The strong line of his jaw, the intensity in his eyes, the slight furrow between his brows that appeared whenever he concentrated deeply. In that moment, I saw both the boy he had been and the man he was becoming. "You need the Henderson file?" I asked, reaching for a folder on my desk. He shook his head. "Already went through it, but I could use your take on this witness statement." I moved to his side, reading over his shoulder. This was our rhythm now, this quiet collaboration, this shared purpose. We didn't talk much about the past anymore. Not about Kellerman's face when the verdict was overturned. Not about Gloria's burned-down house, not about those terrible weeks when I thought I'd lose him forever. Instead, we talked about cases, about clients who needed us, about fixing what could be fixed. See this inconsistency? Jamal pointed to a paragraph, his finger steady. If we cross-reference with the police report... I nodded, following his reasoning. Good catch, make a note for the deposition. He scribbled something in his precise handwriting, then sat back, finally reaching for the coffee I'd brought. He took a long sip, closing his eyes briefly as the warmth hit him. "Thanks," he said, and I knew he meant for more than just the coffee. I returned to my desk, settling in with my own work, the office filled with the sounds of papers shuffling, keyboards clicking, occasional murmurs as we consulted each other. Outside, the city continued its morning bustle, but in here we had created something quiet and solid. I closed my eyes for a moment, just listening to the rhythm of Jamal's breathing across the room, the soft tap of his pen against the desk when he was thinking. For the first time in years, since that terrible day in Kellerman's courtroom, peace felt real. Not perfect, not complete, but real. We had lost so much. My career as DA, Jamal's college years, our blind faith in the system. But sitting here in this sunlit office, watching my son build something new from the ashes of what was taken, I felt something I hadn't expected to feel again. Contentment. The sunbeam shifted, warming my face now. I kept my eyes closed a moment longer, letting the light seep through my eyelids, letting myself believe, just for this quiet morning, that we had found our way home. If you enjoyed this story, I handpicked this next story that you will enjoy. Please don't miss this one. If you enjoyed this story, I handpicked this next story that you will enjoy. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.